Hello, and thank you for joining me again. Now, first of all, I would like to thank you all for subscribing to my channel and joining me on my little adventures. Now, when I first started doing this, I didn't think for a moment that anyone else would be interested. So it's very humbling to have so many subscribers and so many nice comments. Now, as you know, I've visited many churches over the years, particularly ones with strange and interesting legends attached to them. Sometimes there's not enough information to make a proper video, particularly if the churches are locked. So this is a compilation of short videos documenting some of the churches I have visited in Lincolnshire and East Anglia over the past year. Now, it's a lovely summer's day and I'm at All Saints Church in Bracebridge Heath, a suburb of the city of Lincoln. Now, the church dates from Norman times. It was built in around 1066 and restored in 1875 and further restored in 1895. Now, the church tower reminds me of the Templars Preceptory at Temple Brewer, and this might have something to do with the strange legend associated with the churchyard. Now, it is said that a Crusader knight is buried somewhere in this churchyard, and his ghost appears in Bracebridge Hall near a certain painting. He then mounts a ghostly horse and rides here to the graveyard to make sure that no one has tampered with his grave. Now, Bracebridge Hall was built around 1860 and it's now a nursing home. So why a knight from the 13th century is said to haunt it is a mystery. It must have been something to do with the painting that he was so fond of. But if there ever was a backstory to the legend, then it's now been lost to time. I'm in East Ravendale, a small village in north-east Lincolnshire, situated some 6 miles from Grimsby, and this is St Martin's Church. Now, there's not a great deal of information about it other than it was built by architect James Fowler in 1857, and it's a Grade 2 listed building, and unfortunately it's locked. However, there is a rather strange legend attached to this tiny church. It is said that in the winter time a headless man has been seen walking down this path and out of the churchyard. Now, if you're brave enough to hang around, then you'll see him return with his laughing head tucked under his arm. Well, it's a rather chilly spring afternoon and I'm visiting St Michael's Church in the village of Burwell, situated in the Lincolnshire Wolds. It stands on a hill above the village and it's a redundant church which I hope is going to be open. However, I'm here to see a rather interesting tomb, so if the church is open, well, that's going to be a bonus. And we're in luck. Now, St Michael's dates from the 12th century and it was built near a Benedictine priory which is long gone. Now, above the chancel arch is a fragment of a medieval wall painting depicting a crowned head which is said to represent Queen Maud. Let's get a better look. She was also known as Empress Matilda. She had a claim to the English throne during England's first civil war, and she could have been England's first queen. The church was largely built by the Normans in the 12th century after their conquest of England, but it was built over a much older Saxon church. The tower arch dates from the 15th century and it's quite ornate. In the roof of the tower there are 3 elongated angels. Now, I'm always impressed by the craftsmanship and detail that goes into carved wooden roof bosses, but that middle angel, well, it looks more like the devil to me. Okay, I've been walking around the graveyard and I found that interesting tomb that I mentioned earlier. As you can see, it has a beautiful carving of a skull. Now, I've seen lots of tombs and gravestones in East Anglia inscribed with skulls and skull and crossbones, but this is the only one I've ever seen in Lincolnshire. Now let's see who it belongs to. It's totally illegible, unfortunately. Now the front of the tomb looks a bit bland by comparison. I think the skulls would have looked better there. But, you know, I think this would make a great tattoo. Now, St. Michael's is redundant. I think I mentioned that earlier, which means that it's no longer used for regular worship. It's a Grade 1 listed building and it's one of many cared for by the Church Conservation Trust, a charitable organisation, and they do a great job protecting our historic churches. Now, from a distance, I thought that post covered in ivy was someone stood at the gate waiting for me. Very M.R. James. I just hope it doesn't follow me home. This is St. Peter and St. Paul's in Algakirk, a village situated in the borough of Boston. The church dates from the late 12th century and it was restored in the 1850s. It retains many of its medieval features, however I can't show you because the church is locked. But I can tell you a strange story connected to the churchyard. Now, according to legend, the churchyard is haunted by the ghost of a black dog, and it always appears near these trees. In 1938, a local woman, identified only as Mrs. B, described the creature to Lincolnshire folklorist Ethel Rudkin as tall and thin, with a long neck and pointed nose. And she said it would run from the churchyard into the road and then leap over a gate further along. It was always seen to do this. The tradition of black dogs haunting churchyards derives from the Scandinavian legend of the church grim, a guardian spirit that protects the church. The grim takes the form of an animal, usually a wild boar, a horse, and sometimes a lamb. But the English church grim always takes the shape of a large black dog. Some folklorists believe that it had once been the custom to bury a dog alive under the cornerstone of a church as a sacrifice, so its spirit might guard the church. So what manner of creature haunted Algakirk churchyard back in the 1930s? A ghost, a church grim, or possibly just a stray dog? This is the impressive Crowland Abbey, situated in the South Holland district of Lincolnshire. The abbey dates to the early 8th century, and it was formerly part of a Benedictine monastery founded in memory of St Guthlac, a monk who sought to live the life of a hermit at Crowland, which was then a wild and desolate island rising up out of the fens. Legend has it that when Guthlac arrived at Crowland, he had to fight the demons that inhabited the island. They were described as being ferocious in appearance, with great heads, long necks and yellow complexions. They carried Guthlac to the gates of hell, but his patron, Saint Bartholomew, appeared to him and gave him a whip with which to fight off these demons. Guthlac became a spiritual advisor to Ethelbald, a pretender to the throne of Mercia, now known as the East and West Midlands, and prophesied that one day he would gain the throne. Sure enough, Ethelbald became king of Mercia, and 2 years after Guthlac's death, he founded Crowland Abbey. In the year 870, marauding Vikings carried out a ferocious attack on Crowland Abbey. Most of the monks fled for their lives, but the elderly and the infirm remained in the abbey, praying for their enemies when the Vikings struck, and they were all slain as they prayed. Celebrant Abbot Theodore was struck with a sword that went through his skull. The skull of Abbot Theodore, bearing the marks of the fatal wound, is kept today in a room over the abbey porch and can be viewed on request. The bells of Crowland Abbey have an interesting history. They were the first tuned peal of bells heard in England. Also, on November the 1st, 1925, the sound of them ringing became the first ever church bells to be broadcast to the nation on radio. When I visited the abbey on a beautiful day in late April, I had the privilege of being given a guided tour of the impressive clock tower. And my terrible fear of heights was certainly challenged when I climbed the many steps leading to the roof.
You might not want to come out, so you might just want to stick your head up.
I think I'll probably just stick my head up. Oh. God, amazing. Oh, it's a lovely day to be up here though, isn't it?
Yeah. And yes, we have been up to the top.
Oh my goodness. How long have you been doing this?
That's all I've ever done. My great-great-granddad was a builder in Crowland. My granddad, my father, me, and we're all worked on this. So, 110 years we've done most of the work on it.
So 110 years of...
That's what our family have been doing, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
So Peterborough's over there.
Peterborough?
Yeah. If you look at, you see that flat building there, look? You can see that with the 4 chimneys to the left. That's
Oh yeah.
Power station. Spalding power station there, look, with the 2 chimneys.
This is great. Thank you very much.
Arnie up now then.
Yeah.
Just there is a little bit of rope you can hold on to, but it disappears straight away. So don't rely on it.
Well, I think I feel safer going down than I was going up. Now, I can't leave Crowland without visiting Trinity Bridge. Now, this seated figure represents King Ethelbald, who built the abbey, but it's also said to represent Christ holding a loaf of bread. Now this bridge is unique as it has 3 walkways. It was originally made of wood and it was built between 1360 and 1390 by Benedictine monks. The River Welland once flowed through the town. However, sometime in the 17th century the river was rerouted, and now, as you can see, the bridge stands high and dry. This is St Lawrence's Church in the village of Snarford, situated some 9 miles northeast from the city of Lincoln. It's a redundant Anglican church built in the 12th century, but nothing about the exterior of this small medieval church prepares you for the magnificent monuments within. These are the remarkable alabaster tombs of the St Paul family. The St Pauls were local landowners who built a magnificent mansion near the church in 1500, and now nothing remains of the building. Behind the altar is a tomb in the form of a 6-poster bed, with the recumbent bodies of Sir Thomas Paul, who died in 1582, and his wife, Faith Grantham. Sir Thomas was a Member of Parliament and twice served as Sheriff of Lincolnshire. Round the top of the canopy are the kneeling figures of 6 of their children, with the bust of their heir, Sir George, on the top of an altar in the centre. Against the north wall of the chancel stands the tomb of Sir George St Paul, who died in 1613. He was the most successful and influential of the St Pauls. He served as Sheriff of Lincolnshire, and he was knighted by James I in 1607. Below him is his wife Frances Ray, who came from nearby Glentworth, and at the base of the tomb is the effigy of the couple's only child, Matathea, who died in infancy. It is evident that these spectacular Elizabethan and Jacobean tombs, hidden away in the tiny isolated church of Snarford St Lawrence, are some of the most lavish memorial sculptures to be found in Lincolnshire. This is St Andrew's Church, situated in the small village of Stoke Dry in Rutland, the smallest county in England. Much of the present church dates from the 13th and 14th century, but there is evidence that the foundations date from the 10th century. Now, it has interesting medieval paintings and carvings, but I'm here to visit a tiny chamber somewhere in the church where a rather infamous plot was rumoured to have been planned. Now, this is one of 2 columns on either side of the chancel arch. They are Norman carvings, and they depict human figures and strange mythical beasts. There is an interesting figure of a man pulling on a bell rope, and it's thought to be one of the earliest depictions of bell ringing in England. Now, this wall painting dates to the 13th century, and it depicts the death of St Edmund at the hands of the Vikings. He was tied to a tree and shot with arrows. The figure on the right depicts St Christopher carrying the infant Jesus. However, it's the figure of the bowman that's a bit of a mystery. Some scholars believe that the archer represents a Native American. If this is the case, then it suggests that Europeans visited North America centuries before Columbus. Now these steps lead to a parvis, which is a small chamber in a church. And rumour has it that the gunpowder plot of 1605 was planned here by Sir Everard Digby, who, along with his co-conspirators Ambrose Rockwood, who incidentally is one of my ancestors, and of course Guy Fawkes, were executed for their part in the plot. Now, it's unlikely that the gunpowder plot was actually planned here, because it's widely believed that it was planned at the manor house at Ashby St Ledgers in Northamptonshire, the home of Robert Catesby, who conceived the plot. Sir Everard Digby was the lord of the manor here. I believe he was hung, drawn and quartered for his part in the plot. And there are some interesting table tombs to the Digby family in the church. The Church of St Helen, situated in the picturesque village of Ranworth in the Norfolk Broads, dates from the 14th century. It was once richly furnished by wealthy wool merchants, but sadly much of its treasures were destroyed during the Reformation. Known as the Cathedral of the Broads, St Helen is most notable for the magnificent views from its tower. To reach the top requires you to climb 89 steps until finally you reach the 2 ladders that take you past the bells and up to the trap door. But the reward for your climb is spectacular panoramic views of the Norfolk Broads. The church is known for its elaborate medieval paintings, most notably the rood screen depicting the 12 Apostles, which has been described as the finest painted screen in England. It is said to be the work of Brother Pacificus, a monk from the nearby St Benet's Abbey. The story goes that each morning, accompanied by his little dog, he would row his boat across the Broad from the Abbey to St Helen's Church in order to carry out restoration work on the screen. One evening he returned to the Abbey to find his brother monks had been brutally murdered by Henry VIII's soldiers as part of the dissolution of the monasteries. Devastated, Brother Pacificus lingered for years amidst the Abbey ruins, where he eventually died, and the villagers laid him to rest in the shadow of St Helen's, a church that he loved so well. It is said that sometimes in the early morning, when the mist is rising, or on a quiet summer's evening, the ghost of Brother Pacificus can be seen rowing a small boat towards or away from St Helen's, with his dog standing at the bow. But if you fail to see him on the water, and you're brave enough to climb up the 89 steps and the 2 ladders to the roof, then just look up and you will see the weather vane that pays homage to the devotion of Brother Pacificus. Well, that was my look at some of the many churches that I've visited over the past year. And where better to end the video than here at the magnificent Lincoln Cathedral. Well, another Christmas is upon us and a new year beckons, so season's greetings to you all, and I do hope you'll continue to join me on my little adventures in the coming year.